Sales team training, as well as client growth and retention. Visit GordonPartnershipGroup.com. Gordon Partnership Group. Your success is our business. And now, here's your host, Steve Gordon.
George Rodriguez.
Steve Gordon.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
I'm so glad. It is, as we say every Monday,
It's Monday.
another beautiful Monday here in Paradise, Hollywood, Florida.
Yeah.
The SoFloRadio.com, SoFloTelevision.com studios, beautiful Hollywood, Florida. I'm Steve Gordon. This is CEOmanship, and I'm so glad you're here to join us today, live, wherever you're listening from, anywhere in the world, whether you're in our local Florida audience. Thank you for listening.
Even on a plane?
Exactly, even on an airplane. I just got a text.
I'm going to jump on that because it's an exciting time we live in.
Is that the first time that we've had a listener comment that they're listening from an airplane?
Or a watcher. The first time that I know of.
Well, that's pretty cool.
And why not?
So shout out to JetBlue, because now they've added Wi-Fi to their airplanes. I'm going to give them a shameless plug, but I'm going to give it to you, JetBlue, because A, I fly you a lot. Oh, got to put that coaster under my water.
It's for acoustic quality.
And B, because they have added Wi-Fi, and it's my understanding that the basic Wi-Fi is included in your ticket, like the televisions. And so I just got a text.
As it ought to be.
From the lovely Lori, who said, I'll be watching while she's on an airplane right now. So safe travels, and I'll talk to you when you land.
Here we are.
And here you and I are, just the boys.
That's right.
Uh-oh.
No, I'm excited about today's show. You tipped me off.
I did.
About what it was about. And I
usually I throw you under the bus.
get excited about these things. It's blindside me. Like, what? Because it gave me time to actually think about the answer.
And I know you hate thinking, so
about this. No, I like this. This is something that I enjoy. Thinking my teeth into.
Thinking your teeth into.
Yeah.
Wow. So I want to tell our listeners, just because they like to sometimes know the little ins and outs of what happens as we're getting ready to go live on the air. I walked into the studio today, and George says, I'm so excited. I said, why? He said, well, I'm looking forward to your show. And I said, that's great. And then he said, also, I have a new, more powerful computer. And I looked at the desktop that you all can see right in front of George. The laptop.
Oh, this laptop, yeah.
And I said, this one?
This is this bone crusher.
And he said, no, the other one. He said, but this is like my rock of Gibraltar. This computer I've had for a bazillion and 20 years.
Sure.
And it never gets a virus, never goes down. We're 30 seconds from show opening. And you can't get the show opener to start.
Right. And
way to go.
This computer.
And I tell everybody.
Just because I said that. See, I tell you Murphy's Law. Murphy just follows me around.
I thought you were from Cuba. Murphy is not
it's an
Cuban.
Irish thing. Yeah, but nevertheless, my people, they've got some Irish in the woodpile.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So, anyway. So there you go.
I jinxed it by opening up my mouth, my noise hole.
Well, you know what? The audience loves when you do that. We get great feedback. I do too.
I'm going to open it up today. Thank you.
I'm excited because, sometimes you make me do all the work. And even though it's my show and people do tend to listen for, a little bit of what I have to say, I think they love you too, George.
Oh, shucks. I hope so.
I hope so too. Otherwise, I can't fire you.
No, right. Although that's actually, that ties in.
Uh-oh.
Getting fired. There's a fired story.
Oh, my goodness.
Among this, one of the stories.
Now, it's really funny because what the audience also, what you folks don't know is quite often I don't tell George what we're going to talk about until I get here, and that's supposed to be about a half an hour before the show, and it's usually instead of 30 minutes, 30 seconds.
By often, you mean never.
Right. And so then I turn to George and I ask a question, and I get the look of deer in headlights. But you're so good and so comfortable at what you do that you just make it look easy.
I just make it up. That is, I think, what you're trying to say. I don't have to today.
So that's the sister show called Showmanship, not CEOmanship.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, only minor embellishing today.
Okay,
on these real life stories.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about, actually a lot about, the traits of what makes a great leader, or what traits great leaders tend to have in common. We're going to talk a little bit about similar traits for entrepreneurs if we have time. If not, that'll be a separate show. And we'll go from there. But before we do that, I wanted to say the reason that I chose this topic is because we are just days away from the second of 3 Republican debates. And you seem to turn on the television everywhere, or at least I do, and they are talking over and over again about the traits of a great leader. This one's not a good leader. This one's a good leader. And I started to think, well, what makes someone a good leader in other people's eyes, and what really are the common traits of a good leader? And I have to tell you that as I did my research for this show, I started to put together compilations of what those traits were, and it's amazing because there are some folks that I've worked within my life, whether consulting or doing business with, that truly matched almost 100% of these traits. And these are people that when I'm having conversations and the topic of, who's a great leader in business in your life, these names come up over and over again. So it's interesting that as I read these traits, I could literally pin them onto individuals in my life. So before we continue, I just wanted to mention again that today's show is brought to us by Servi. And Servi, S-I-R-V-I, and that's servi.com. Servi is your access 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to a personal concierge. I mean, imagine, George, being able to literally pick up your cell phone, while I'm picking up mine, and from your cell phone have access to unbelievable opportunities, deals, promotions, specials, travel, medical help. Let's say you're stranded somewhere. Maybe you're like Lori. I hope it's not Lori, but like Lori on an airplane landing in another city, and maybe needed some medical help because by the time you got off the airplane, you had a sore throat. And so you literally push a button and you could speak to and actually visually see through your telephone's application your medical doctor. And he or she could then give you a diagnosis and even prescribe medication. Yes, George, your throat looks sore.
Like a FaceTime kind of thing?
It's very similar. Right. They turn on your phone. Let me look in your throat. Yep, you're right. It's sore.
I'm not going to stick my tongue out. I have coffee tongue right now. So.
Well, okay, so they prescribe something for that. It's called a toothbrush.
Tongue scraper.
A tongue scraper, right. Oh, so anyway. Then legal help and travel discounts and promotions on shopping. I mean, it's really amazing. But the best part to me is being able to literally push a single button on the phone and someone here in the United States answers that telephone and says, George, how can we help you? And you say, you know what? I've got an amazing show going on in my studio today. I've got this guy, Steve Gordon, who does the CEOmanship show. I'd like to have a basket of fruit delivered because I don't want him to go hungry before the show. And after that, I need to make reservations for dinner because I have another friend coming in from out of town. And then I'll be traveling the following week to Los Angeles, so I'll need tickets from Fort Lauderdale Airport or Miami, whichever is less expensive. They're kind of in the middle here. And at the same time, can you get me a hotel reservation and dinner reservations at a great restaurant, say Italian restaurant, or maybe a Cubano restaurant? Because
instead, you have to call me because
I was going to say that in Spanish.
Usted?
Yes, that's the best I know. I was going to say you love Cuban food. Anyway. So I'll work on that for next week.
I'll write that. I'll coach you.
And so literally, George, for less than $1 a day, you could have access to that concierge service. We've done studies with Servi to figure out that even an hour a day or a couple of hours a week saved. I always say time is money, dollars for hours, right?
Sure.
And so just figure out what your time is worth, and if you could let somebody else, you can delegate. That's foreshadowing for today's show, don't you think? Mm-hmm. If you could just sort of delegate some of your more menial tasks to the concierge, why not? And then use that time to be more productive or be with your family or do something you love. In your case, roller skating or hitting the food trucks on Mondays here at the Circle in Hollywood, Florida.
That's a good thing.
That is a good thing.
I usually hit them because instead of paying, You get it?
I was hoping you'd say something after that. While I took a sip of water.
Taking a sip of water. That's called leaving you hanging there.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
It's called dead air.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'm sure the folks at Survey loved the dead air in the middle. You're supposed to be the producer. 19 years, the #1 talk show in South Florida, and you leave
still
me
taking
hanging.
me by surprise. And I got a page full of notes here.
And then of course the other thing is, if you are a business owner, imagine giving your top employees, your top salespeople, for example, your management team, access to this service. Because, if you figure out what they're worth to your company every hour, if you could have them using a service like Survey, even let's say 10 of them, your 10 most important key employees, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're looking at under $4,000 a year for your top, in fact, $3,600 a year or less for your top 10 employees to be more productive, appreciate you as a business owner. Of course, they're not going to know that you're actually getting more out of their time anyway. They're just going to think you love them. But Survey, so as a listener of this show that's listening now, if you're not listening in the archives down the road, but until Survey actually goes live, which will be a few more weeks, if you go to survey.com and you fill out the contact form and you mention that you were listening to SoFlo Radio, either live or on our archives, at least until the middle of October 2015, we'll give you access to use Survey for no charge at all, so that you could give us a little feedback, and that's our way of saying thank you for being a fan of SoFlo Radio, SoFlo Television, and CEOmanship.
Excellent.
How'd I do?
Perfect. Sew it up. I can even edit that dead air out of there.
There we go. So, so with that said, today, again, listening to all of the political mumbo jumbo, that screen went blank. Is that okay? Okay, just checking. It's a new computer. I got to keep on top of
all kinds of things.
First dead air, now the show goes down. Sure. Okay. Anyway, so for those of you again who were listening a few minutes ago, I was talking about the fact that it's a beginning of a political frenzy, and the word over and over that is being bandied around is leadership. And so, George,
Steve,
what if I said to you, as I did before the show, so people don't think you're that smart today, so I'm not going to give you credit.
By text.
Yeah, I did tip you off. So when I say leadership, and people, let's say in your life, particularly business people,
sure.
What would who would you consider are some great leaders? Let's not go through the whole list in a row. Let's not vomit the whole list out, as they say. Let's go through like one or two at a time and talk about why you perceive these folks to be great leaders.
Well, I'm going to give you a couple for the same reason and save number 3 for the last, the best one. It really exemplifies that aspect, but also another very important aspect as well. And the other, and because the first two are kind of contrasts of each other, but similar, I think. And that's Alexander the Great and Gandhi. And
I'm not sure I'm seeing the similarity.
Well, and I will tell you the similarity is both of them walked the walk. Whatever they expected their people to do, whatever they expected the people who they were leading to do, they did it also. They did it first. They did it first and foremost. Alexander slept with his troops.
Lead by example.
Absolutely lead by example. He slept under the same conditions with his troops. He ate the same food, and he inspired them to great deeds. I don't know what campaign it was because I didn't do the wiki thing on him like I did with Cincinnati's foreshadowing. But there's one campaign when they landed their boats on the shores. I think it was on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean. There, he had the boats burned, and the men were like, "How are we going to get back home?" And he said, "In their boats, or we're not going home." So a lot of inspirational things. But the thing that when he said we're going in this direction, the reason that the people followed him in that direction is that he went there first. He didn't set himself apart from his soldiers, and he inspired them because they all considered him one of them. And he was like, when they charged, he was on the front line. He wasn't in the back, from a safe place saying, "Hey, you guys go kill those people." He was one of them.
I have to tip you off more often because that was a good one.
Thank you. And Gandhi, in case you don't know, because people nowadays identify the Hindus with pacifism and peace and crunchy yoginess, but that was not a part of Hindu history or culture.
Did you say or even crunchy yoginess?
Yes, crunchy yoginess. hippie types and peace and Om and incense. People identify Hinduism, the Om, with all of that peace stuff, but that wasn't always the case. Their religion, very much like the Eastern, the Middle Eastern religions, had warfare written into it, and the Hindu people, the Indian people, had lots of wars and weapons and a tradition of that, just like everybody else does. They weren't into pacifism. It was Gandhi that suggested that they use pacifism as a way to repel or discontinue the British occupation. It was a revolutionary concept. He told his people, basically, ignore them and they'll go away. And they didn't want to. They wanted to attack. And he said, no, that won't work. You have to ignore them and they'll go away. And he led by example. He was beaten. He was jailed. He was tortured. All of these horrible things were inflicted upon him and his people, and he led by example. He endured all of these outrageous things that the British were doing, and indeed he was right, and he inspired the people to use his method, and they were successful in using his method because he led by example.
Wow. Now my question to you is, was this all because I tipped you off an hour?
Well, these are things that I already knew. You
are a plethora, a cornucopia.
Just wait till I get to Lucius, my boy Lucius. So, but because these are people that I've always admired. So when you sent me a text, I think about some leaders, and I'm like, I think about great leaders all the time and learn lessons from them, great leaders throughout history. But nobody ever talks about Lucius. So I'll go ahead and when you're ready, because the leading by example thing is an element of all of them. But there, I've given you examples of how leading by example can lead to success for you as a leader and the people that you're leading.
There's no question that particular topic of leading by example or getting in the trenches, so to say,
yes,
is seen over and over and over again in examples of great leaders. And I can tell you that on the ride down here, as I was dropping Lori off to the airport this morning, we were talking about today's show, and we were talking about leaders and people that we have worked either for or with in our lives, some that we know together, some that we do not know together, that were just part of each of our individual lives before there was in our life. And it was interesting because as we went through, it was very easy to pick out the people that were great leaders. And I did not share my show notes today with Lori. Sometimes, we talk about the show in advance, especially when she'll be on. But for today, we had a lot going on, and so I didn't really share my show notes. In fact, the conversation in the beginning of the ride to the airport was, so what are you going to talk about today? And I said, the traits that make up great business. Yeah, I said, I don't know. Right. So I said, I want to talk about the traits that make up either entrepreneurs or great entrepreneurs of our times and before, and also great leaders, starting with leaders first. And I explained why. And then, within seconds, Lori said, well, let me tell you about some of the great leaders in my life. And when you say leaders, this is what I'm thinking about. And we talked about several things. Communication is a big one, right? Because if you're not able to listen to what the people around you are saying, you're not going to be really a successful leader. In other words, if you're so myopic that you think that your way is the only way, then you're not going to take you may be good, but I think there's a very big difference between good to great, which, by the way, is a great book. If you've never read Good to Great,
no,
it's a fabulous book. A little plug, but really worth it. Again, talks about traits of great leaders, and so one of them is communication. Another one, we talked about individuals, and I said to Lori, I go, well, what made him or her so great? Like, tell me about this person. And another word that came up, and then I'm going to give some examples, is accessible. They were people that didn't sit up in the throne, so to say, and just sort of talk down to the minions. The doors were open. And so, You just got a text and you wrote down another name.
I got a text from the lovely Lori Gordon.
Oh, she texted you, not me. That's why?
She knows it'll get through.
Right.
And I'm obedient. I got one for her. So
okay, go ahead.
No, well, she said, "What about female leaders? What about great female leaders?" And of course, I got one that I admire. So you'd let me know when.
So it's nice to know that we do have a listener from an airplane. And by the way, if you'd like to call in and give us examples of people who are great leaders that you think are great leaders, since we are live today, little tip is we aren't always live, but today we are live. The number is 954-990-0036, 954-990-0036. And if you have an example of a great leader, we'd be happy to take your call. Or you can just text me or George.
It's dangerous. When I give the number out on my show, I just get crank calls.
We've gotten a few on mine, too. But thanks for tipping my audience off. That happens sometimes. Way to go. Another thing is honesty. People know
getting into Lucius.
Okay, shall we?
You go ahead about your honesty. I'm going to give you a real world example.
So I think people aren't stupid. They can see.
They're
through.
Not. I thought you lived in South Florida.
I do. Well,
it must be.
George said that. I just want to go on the record.
I live in South Florida. It's a running gag down here. I think it's the swamp gas. It affects our brains.
I don't know. But I can say that people want to work with people that they like and trust. They want to do business with the people they like and trust. Trust is a big deal. Well, honesty, trust, it all goes together.
Yes.
So I'm talking about honesty. You are frothing at the mouth to talk about Lucius. So
go ahead. That's his first name. Most people know him as Cincinnatus. His friends call him Lucius. Lucius Quincius Cincinnatus. Born 519 BC, did his thing about 550 BC. 430 was when he died. And, so this is a long time ago when the Roman Empire wasn't an empire yet. It was the Roman Republic. They weren't an empire until around Jesus' time, Caesar Augustus. In case you didn't know,
amazing.
They were a proto-democracy. We learned a lot. They had a Senate. People see that banner, SPQR. It says SPQR, and then nobody knows, with the eagle. When the Romans march, nobody knows what that means. That stands for Senatus Populus Quo Romanus, the Senate and the people of Rome. No emperor. We don't have an emperor. We have a Senate. And it was a tiered governmental system. It was a representative form of government.
Love it.
And they were freakishly paranoid about becoming an empire, having a king like all of these other people. They thought that they were a modern society. Even in ancient times, it's like, we've got this thing over here. We don't have a king. We don't serve this king. Indeed, the Senate was supposed to serve the people. So here we go. The Romans are fighting 3 wars at the same time against the Aequians, the Sabines, and the Volscians. These were the indigenous peoples, the barbarians of the land. Yeah, and it wasn't going well for them. And they said, the Senate met, and they said, we need to appoint a military dictator, which it wasn't a bad word then. It was just someone to dictate the actions of the military. But they were very reluctant to do so. The reason they hadn't up until that point is they were afraid that once a single person was given command of the military, he would use the military to retain power, and then they would become a dictatorship. And then he would declare himself the king or the emperor, and they would revert to the system like everybody else. And
the system that they were trying
to avoid. They wanted to be a democracy. So they mulled it over, and they decided that Cincinnatus, who had been a senator previously, but because of something that his son did, Cincinnatus gave up his position and sold almost all of his property in order to pay his son's fines so that his son wouldn't be put to death. All right, so all of the senators remembered Cincinnatus as a man of honor and integrity, and a man who would always do what he said he would do, a man of his word. So they contacted him. He had a simple little farm with just a few hands and tended some, vineyard and this and that. And they said, "You're being recalled." And they go to the Senate. It's like, no, the Senate is commanding you to be the military dictator. He's like, I don't want to be the military dictator. It's like, we're not even leaving it up to you, buddy. Get on your toga, come over to the Senate. We're going to swear you in. And you're going to take control of the military, and you are going to squash our enemies. And then, after that's all done, you are going to relinquish power and give it back to the Senate, okay? and Cincinnatus is like, okay. He did that. He won the wars. He rallied the military. He won the wars, and as soon as it was done, he gave the baton of leadership back to the Senate, took off his toga, went back to his farm, and everybody in the Senate said, How about that? Ain't that something? And he was a hero to the people for many years to come. As an old man, one of the another guy, they became military dictator, and he did indeed do, or tried to do, what they were afraid of. He wouldn't relinquish the power of the military.
I was going to ask that.
So what did the senators do about this guy? Spurius Malleus, by the way. Spurius Malleus. I got the military. I'm going to be the emperor. I'm going to sit here on my estate with my people, and I'm going to rule Rome. And if anybody has a problem with it, I'm going to tell the generals to wipe them out. What did the Senate do?
Do tell.
They sent a letter to Cincinnatus. Get your toga. Come back to the Senate. We are appointing you military dictator. And he's like, well, Malleus thinks he's the military dictator. I go, well, we're going to send letters to all of the generals. We're going to send dispatches to all of the generals saying that the Senate says you're in charge. Okay? And so they swear Cincinnatus back in. Cincinnatus dispatches the master of the horse, which is basically like the head cop, master of the horse, and take the police force and go and arrest Spurius Malleus, and bring him before the Senate. And the master of the horse says, what if he doesn't come? He thinks he's in charge. Tell him that I said I'm in charge, and bring him back, dead or alive. Bring him back. It's not a request. Bring him back. So the master of the horse shows up at the estate, at Malleus' estate. Malleus refuses to go, orders the generals, and the generals say, we're not going to oppose Cincinnatus. It's Cincinnatus. If Cincinnatus says he's in charge, he's in charge. We remember Cincinnatus. Cincinnatus is honest. Cincinnatus is honorable. If it's between you and him, guess what? No contest. The generals stood down. The master of the horse and his men stormed the estate and killed Malleus and all of his supporters. Boom, the end. Coup undone. They uncooed the coup, and Rome remained a republic until around Jesus' time, around the turn from BC to AD, when Caesar Augustus took over. And indeed, remember, Cincinnatus became a saying that the Romans would issue whenever somebody else tried to take power. It lasted for hundreds of years. If someone tried to be all uppity and tried to become the emperor, the Romans would say, remember Cincinnatus, you're dishonoring Cincinnatus. Cincinnatus is going to confront you in the afterlife. You're going to have to answer to Cincinnatus in the afterlife. What are you going to say to him? And it endured. So he was a leader. He remained a leader even after his death.
Because he was a man of his word.
Because he was a man of his word. Because he was
So
honest.
Today's episode of This Day in History by George Rodriguez
right,
is brought to you by Survey.com.
I'm very excited about Cincinnatus, as you can tell, because I think that's the most important thing in a leader. I think that there are a lot of elements that make up a good leader, but if you aren't honorable, what's the point of following that guy?
Well, they won't. Eventually, look, if people understand that as a leader, you don't keep your word, or you're not trustworthy, or it's even, think about it, even with our children, we would say things like, if those girls are talking about another girl in front of you, and it could be boys, then they're probably talking about you in front of somebody else. So just be really careful, and maybe those aren't the people you want to spend time with. It's no different with a boss. If you're traveling, or you're sitting in someone's office that you report to, and they're talking about something confidential or semi-confidential about another employee, that should make you very nervous, because the odds are they're probably talking about you to somebody else. And, you've got to be able to trust. Trust goes both ways. Sure. Imagine when you've got a review going on. And during that review, you've got to talk about things that could be very personal, and you have to know that what is said in that room stays in that room. It's kind of like Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Right? Another
that's
bad
a good
plug.
analogy.
So we talked about that. We talked about being trustworthy, honest, just out of curiosity. Do you have a couple more? Don't say who.
I got one because, the text from Laurie. I got one later on, and she exemplifies another important element, so we can get to her later.
That's called a tease. We'll use that
Yes,
after.
it is.
We'll use that after the break. So we talked about communication, being accessible, being honest, confidentiality, trustworthy. Here's another one: having a vision. Great leaders see well beyond their headlights. I talk about particularly leaders and CEOs that I've worked with in the past. And sometimes I say, well, this particular person is so smart that they're way beyond the headlights. And what I mean by that is, they're so far ahead of what you can see that they're thinking about things that the rest of the company hasn't even considered could be a potential or an option, especially in today's world of fast-paced technology, right? If you think about when I'm looking at for those of you who don't know, Apple just made their annual announcement, and they talked about some upgrades to their phones and their iPads. And every time they do, most of us sit around and they go, I wonder what they're going to announce. Because what else could they add, right? And then I think, when I was young, right, we joke about this. I know that you're young, George, but when I was young, you had one phone that was attached to the wall.
In the kitchen.
If you were lucky and you were a wealthy family, you had two phones in the house, one that you could talk to your friends on and one that your mother could pick up and say, who are you talking to? Or
Get out the phone.
Get out the phone. I have to make a call. There was no call waiting. And the idea of having something that fits in your pocket that could literally do everything for you, including give you 24-hour access to a concierge via survey.com, but at the same time could give you information about Lucius, or you could talk about things like what makes a great business leader a great business leader. I mean, the idea of being able to have 24-hour and 7-day a week access to our kids, which drives our kids crazy. But my point is, nobody from our generation could have ever imagined a cell phone or a smartphone. And yet you talk to somebody who's like 8 years old, not that I do that often, and it's like, so what's the big deal?
I do.
Well, you do because you have kids, little kids, right? But for me, the idea, you talk to, you talk to your daughter, and well, she's not 8, but you talk to your daughter, how old is she?
She's 13.
Okay, 13, right.
2. The younger one is 13.
Right. So your youngest one is 13, but for her, this is like, who cares?
It's nothing, right?
It's nothing. And then I think to myself, what are they going to be thinking is crazy, like long after we're gone? So great leaders are looking so far down the road that they're thinking, what is it that's going to keep this company sustained and moving forward well beyond my time on this earth? And so with that question, I'll let you think about that for a minute. We will be right back. This is CEOmanship with Steve Gordon and George Rodriguez. Remember him?
Thank you.
On SoFlo Television and SoFloRadio.com.
More CEOmanship with Steve Gordon next on SoFloRadio.com.
Put a team of professional consultants behind your home or business computer with Key Information Solutions, providing solutions to your internet and computing needs while keeping you on the cutting edge of technology. Preventative maintenance and networking support, hardware and custom-built computers. Let Key Information Solutions be your personal tech staff for your home or office with affordable hourly, monthly, or annual rates to fit anyone's budget. Call Key Information Solutions now, 954-973-3374. That's 954-973-3374. Or visit keyinformation.com.
When you're ready to actually lose weight safely and steadily while being monitored by a physician, the Weight Loss Clinic of Dr. Kim Jacobson is there for you. The family medicine practice was established by her father in 1956 and continues as a medical practice that now specializes in weight reduction. Dr. Kim Jacobson joined the practice 20 years ago as both a family medicine practitioner and weight loss specialist. The Weight Loss Clinic utilizes a combination of appetite suppression medication and vitamins to produce great results, usually 3 to 4 pounds per week for most patients. Now you can change your lifestyle while still enjoying your own food, just less of it. They offer a choice of 2, 3, or 4-week plans. So whether you just need to lose a few pounds or a lot, the Weight Loss Clinic of Dr. Kim Jacobson can help you. They're located at 5454 Northeast 4th Avenue in Miami, just 2 blocks west of 54th Street and Biscayne Boulevard. Call them at 305-751-0091. They'll be happy to answer any and all of your questions. That's 305-751-0091. Get started on a beautiful new body today with Dr. Kim Jacobson and the Weight Loss Clinic.
You wanted something rocking?
I think you left me some dead air again.
I did.
George.
One of those days.
Marsha.
I'm going to blame you for that. You were talking to me during the break.
Well, that's what we're supposed to do. Okay, so we were talking about traits that make a great business leader a great business leader. George had mentioned several. Alexander the Great and Lucius. Gandhi.
Cincinnatus. Not a lot of people call him by his first name, Lucius.
Okay. Well, he and I are tight. We're buds. So we talked about several traits: honest, accessible, open communication, trustworthy. We talked about having a vision. Another thing, and I think this has to do with Lucius, my friend, first name, and that is that Lucius, right, was one who had strength, and even in times of adversity. The thing is to keep cool, right? To not show that you're sweating, so to say, because your employees, much like your children, and maybe your spouse or your family, will take their cue from you. And so if something goes wrong, you're about to launch a product, and all of a sudden, like a day before a huge launch, you find a bug, you can do one of two things. You can say to your team, oh my God, what are we going to do? We have launch tomorrow. Or you go, okay, look, these things happen. We're all going to work 24 hours around the clock. We got, 20 hours left, whatever it is. I'm going to get in there with you. And we're going to get this fixed. And nobody's going to know about it until after. And it's going to be like no big deal. Right? So if you did that with your team, they might say to you things like, all right, well, yeah, we'll get it done. But eventually, it's follow the leader, which you were saying before.
Yeah.
Right, lead by example.
Absolutely.
Strong, but empathy too is so important. Sometimes as a great leader, I think it's important to have a little bit of an ear and understanding that people have things in their lives and things happen. And to be compassionate, I'm going to share some stories with you of some folks. Another one, is persistence, right? I think persistence is incredibly important. And when you look at great leaders, look at how many great leaders, for lack of a positive term, failed more than one time, right? But you don't remember those failures.
Of course not.
Right? So Henry Ford, in the 1890s, Henry Ford came up with what was called the Ford quadricycle. This is where I get to be a geek, right?
History geek,
right? It's called the Ford quadricycle, right? This was a vehicle that was made up of a frame literally mounted on like 4 large bicycle wheels, all right? And then it had like an ethanol-powered engine. Well, needless to say, it wasn't exactly a whopping success, right? But so Henry Ford could have either just gone, all right, I just tried and didn't work. But instead, he ended up founding the Ford Motor Company, invented the Model T, and became one of the wealthiest human beings in the world. So the question is, do you try and quit if you fail, or do you just dust yourself off and go, all right, next? And so that's a great example. And there's so many of them. Colonel Sanders with Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Sure.
And they talk about, something like, I don't want to quote the number because somebody will tweet in later on and say I was wrong, but it was close to 2,000 restaurants that didn't want that chicken recipe. But
when he took his show on the road.
Yep. We would go from restaurant to restaurant.
He developed it in the back room of a gas station. He sold chicken on the side.
Right.
While people were getting their cars serviced because it was the full service thing, so you had to wait for them to do the dipstick.
There you go. Right, and that was of course after the quadricycle. Again, how many times did it take to invent the light bulb? I think a couple more than that. Right?
A lot, yeah. I think most people know that story. So perseverance.
Right. So persistence, right? The second one is you talk about never giving up. This is a story that I found fascinating, right? Walt Disney's editor at the Kansas City Star literally told him that he had no good ideas and lacked imagination.
Yeah.
Which is why I believe that they call all the people there Imagineers. Because that was
all
like
right.
his
Makes sense.
subtle FU to his... Can I say that on my show?
You just did.
All right. Well, I just did. To his old editor. But he could have, again, taken those harsh words, right, and just gone and done nothing. But instead, changed the world, created, most successful animator of all time, 22 Academy Awards, created characters that everybody knows like Mickey Mouse, theme parks that are all over the world now, where you have to wait in line in the heat here in Orlando is one of them. But he didn't give up. Here's another great example, right? So great leaders that have an eye for talent. So sometimes, we've been talking about business leaders, but I often compare business leaders to coaches in sporting events, right? Look at a great coach. We talked a few weeks back about when the New York Islanders had their run of 5 Stanley Cups in a row. But that coach did not keep the same 20-some-odd players on the team because as great as they were, the dynasty that they were, and by the way, I say that, but I was a Rangers fan, so it killed me to watch that. But as great as they were, they still sharpened the saw, right? Because they could be better. And so great leaders have that vision for talent. You look at people like great leaders also, they're not afraid to surround themselves with great talent, right? And great and smart people. Steve Jobs, I read, actually, number one, he interviewed over 5,000 people personally.
Really?
Well, that's what they said.
Okay.
Right? So I'm going to choose to believe that. During his lifetime, and he managed all of the hiring for his team. On top of that, he would actually go to lectures at universities so that he could actually scout out the potential employees. It's like going to a college football game for an NFL team. Unbelievable.
Wow.
But he didn't hire scouts. He physically went himself. We talked about never giving up. I was going to tease you and ask you what companies like Google and Facebook and Yahoo have in common, but the answer is that they are all billion-dollar corporations. And great business leaders are not satisfied at being $1 million or $100 million or $1 billion. You look at these companies and they are constantly looking for the next edge, the next step. We talked about thinking, well, what could possibly be next? But you know what? There's always something. And then when it happens, we just take it for granted. Facebook does something or Google does something or Apple does something on our phones. They come out with a new operating system that does something really cool. And you're like, wow, that's great. And 2 days later, you forget that it was incredible. And the years of thought and research and programming and detail and the people and the hours of sleepless nights that went into that so that you could just hold your phone down and it says, should I take a selfie or take a picture the other way? Right? And you're like, well, that was smart, right? I'm going to destroy this name, and I'm sorry, but Ingvar Kamprad, who's the founder of IKEA, right? So we have an IKEA here in South Florida, right? Said that the most dangerous poison is the feeling of achievement. Oh, and the antidote to everything that we think can be done better tomorrow. The antidote is to every evening. I'm sorry, let me try that again. The antidote is to every evening think about what can be done better tomorrow.
Okay.
In other words, again, in that book, Good to Great, they say that the biggest challenge to great is good. In other words, let's say you're a great sales professional, right? And you are top in your field. You're making $500,000, $1 million a year. Like crazy money, right? Mm-hmm. Well, for some people, crazy money. And you go, I'm good. Like you get to a point where your life is so comfortable that you don't push yourself to the next level. And so there's an example of where good keeps you from being great. And great leaders push themselves beyond that good feeling of complacency to the next level. And those are the innovators, the geniuses of our time, and so on and so forth. They're fearless. I remember early on in the show, I said to you, George, here's my bucket list for guests.
Yeah.
All right. And one of those names was Richard Branson. right?
Right.
And I put Richard Branson on there because I admire Richard as a business person, as many do. But I think that you talk about fearless, right? Think of all the, I was going to say crazy things that Richard Branson does, but he puts himself out there to prove that anything can be done. I heard a story about Branson that when he was younger, he went on a family vacation, and after I guess it was his aunt supposedly bet him that he could not learn to swim during the time of the family trip. And evidently, after failing to master that skill of swimming during the trip, on the drive home, he insisted that his father, pull the car over, and he jumped into a river and swam just so he could win the bet that he did it before they got home, and it was still considered his family vacation. That that rocks. Hashtag Branson rocks.
Fun guy, nice
right?
style.
And so he says you have to get out of your comfort zone, and that you don't learn to walk by following the rules. You learn by doing and falling over.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Right. So before I continue. Mm-hmm. You had another name that you
I did,
to...
and fearless. It's so funny. That's a very psychic moment because she's an example of fearlessness. Because that was another aspect that I wanted to talk about is being brave and being bold as a leader. That's who has to be. I believe the leader's the one that needs to be leading. Like, we're going to go over here and we're going to do this scary thing and inspire you to follow.
I remember early conversations with the folks at Serving, and when we were talking about their rolling out this project, and I said I would be very interested in working with you on this project. They said, well, how interested? Because if you want to step into this, your head's going to roll first.
Yeah.
If it doesn't go, I go, bring it on. Right? Because if I had even buckled at that moment and thought, do I really want to do this? Once they see you sweat, game's over. But I meant it. I'm like, hell yeah, I can do this.
Well, this next leader, because, by request, Lori, and it's a very good idea, we don't want to leave the ladies out. And it's my favorite female leader, and it's not Cleopatra. A lot of people are going to think that. Not that she doesn't deserve her props, but I'm choosing Boudica, Queen Boudica of the Celts, of the Britons. And it always ties into the Romans.
Go ahead.
And it's not. There's nothing funny about it. It was during Claudius's reign. By the way, watch Claudius, the old Masterpiece Theater PBS thing. It's very educational. Claudius was the emperor that came after Caligula, and everybody remembers him because he was crazy. But the Roman occupied Britain. The Romans were not being nice to the native Britons in England, and they had killed most of the men. Most of the men had already died resisting the Romans, and the people were very subjugated and being treated very badly by the Romans. And Boudica, who was the widow of one of the chieftains, had had enough, and she took up the role of leader and rallied the people and started resisting first just a little bit, just she, herself, her daughters, her two daughters, and her family, and then her village, and then they picked up more and more followers, and they resisted the Romans, and they caused the Romans a great deal of damage. They took the Romans by surprise, and it took a long time to recover from that. I know a lot of people, if you know English history, the Romans wouldn't leave England until, another 500 years or so, 400 years. So eventually Boudica was defeated, and it was a huge battle, and it could have gone either way, and it was very close. They were on the verge. She outlived, her rebellion outlived Claudius's reign on into Nero's reign, and Nero was on the verge of withdrawing the Roman troops, but one of the governor and general of that campaign finally won, using Roman military knowledge, and just being very methodical about that. And she couldn't resist. She killed herself rather than be taken alive by the Romans and punished and embarrassed by them. But she remained a folk hero to the Britons and a symbol of resistance, rebellion, and fighting for what you believe rather than allow yourself to be subjugated and just take what's handed to you.
Well, there are so many incredible examples of great female leaders. But I was thinking, as you were speaking of Boudica,
yes,
I was thinking of a more modern day example, and something you said made me think of Rosa Parks.
Indeed.
Right?
Indeed.
I mean, here's somebody that literally stepped out of the comfort zone.
Oh, yeah.
And said, that's it. I'm sitting here right in front. And, that took courage.
It sure did.
Fearlessness. It took being a leader.
In that time and place, boy, it just would have been so convenient to just move.
Right. And
so much easier.
No, not moving.
Yeah.
My point is there are so many great examples, and yet they all tie into those factors that we talked about earlier as great. The foundation for what I believe makes a great leader, and the common traits that so many great leaders have. Do you have others there?
No. I mean, I could go on and on, but that was by the request. I mean, I could talk about Cleopatra, but
I just wanted to make sure time-wise.
I'm not a huge fan of personally of Cleopatra. I mean, there were a lot of leaders throughout history that sure they had a lot of positive traits, but ultimately they were very self-serving people. That weren't very interested in the people. So the leaders that impress me are the leaders that rose up and did what they did on behalf of the people, and it was for the people, and that was a view that they held. It's like, I'm doing this because the people need someone to do this. So in all those cases,
here's a couple more real quick traits. One is to be tough.
Okay,
right?
sure.
I think that there is a place where you have to just basically say, all right, I'm in charge. Right? And so you can listen and you can honor requests. Doesn't mean you have to take care of all those requests. But at the end of the day, someone's got to lead, whether it's in business or whatever. You have to stand up for yourself. And so when somebody challenges you, sometimes you have to fight back. Donald Trump said in an interview once that you not only have to fight back, but sometimes you have to be brutal and be tough. Ironically, Michael Bloomberg, two names that are in the press these days, agreed, and stating at a commencement ceremony that in the business world, it's dog eat dog, and you occasionally have to throw some elbows, end quote. Sounds like roller derby and an ice hockey game.
Sure.
But on the other hand, you don't always have to be, the toughness doesn't have to mean nasty.
Okay.
Right? You could be strong, but not be nasty. So John D. Rockefeller, another example, said that the ability to deal with people is as purchasable as a commodity as sugar or coffee. And continuing his quote, and I will pay more for that ability than any other thing under the sun. A more modern day example would be Mark Cuban. We see him on Shark Tank, for those of you who watch that show. And of course, Mark Cuban is an unbelievable business professional. He put things a little more simply. He said, people hate dealing with people who are jerks. And he says, it's always easier to be nice than to be a jerk, so don't be a jerk, essentially.
Okay.
I like the way
good
you put
advice.
that together. Yes. Howard Schultz, here's another one. Talk about having laser focus, right? So who's Howard Schultz?
Who's Howard Schultz?
Howard Schultz started with a vision, okay? A single brand with coffee houses across the world. So you're starting to figure out who it might be, right? And he turned that dream into a reality and founded what we know today as Starbucks, right? You can't go anywhere without a Starbucks. They're everywhere. And so he says, quote, I think if you're an entrepreneur, you've got to dream big and then dream bigger. It's seeing what other people don't see and pursuing that vision, which is what we talked about earlier. And of course, let me just sort of wrap this up, tie a nice little bow around it. We talk about being passionate. Every great leader has the ability to lead because they have passion that people realize is real, and passion that they can feel, and passion that just grabs you and says, I will follow that person. I can see the way you're looking at me.
It's right? Very passionate the way you said that.
So going back to Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs said, you have to be burning with an idea, or a problem or a wrong that you want to right. If you're not passionate enough from the start, you will never stick with it. And another great female example of a leader, Oprah Winfrey said,
Oh, yeah.
passion is energy. She continued, feel the power that comes from doing whatever excites you. You know what excites me, George?
What?
Coming to this studio on Mondays, sitting with you. Unfortunately, we're at that time because I love starting Mondays here with you in the studio on
Right back at you.
CEOmanship Radio. Brought to you by Survey. Once again, Survey.com. George, thanks so much.
Steve, thank you.
To our listeners from around the world, to our viewers from around the world, thank you.
Lori,
Thank you.
watching on the plane.
For Lori watching at 30,000 feet, thank you. Safe travels. I love you. Thank you for making this such a great part of my life, all of you, because if there were nobody listening and nobody watching, there would be no show.
Right on.
And so, once again, this is Steve Gordon. This is CEOmanship Radio and TV on SoFlo Television and SoFloRadio.com. See you next Monday.
You're listening to SoFloRadio.com.